My family thought I'd lost my mind when I chose a homeless child over them. But what they didn't understand was that this little boy gave me something I'd been starving for in my own home for 23 years: love, appreciation, and the feeling that I actually mattered to someone. By the time my story ends, you'll understand why I walked away from everything I'd built and started over in a foreign country with a child who wasn't even mine. Because sometimes the family you choose loves you better than the family you're born into. Have you ever felt completely invisible in your own home? Like you could disappear and no one would even notice? Because what happened to me will make you question but whether blood really is thicker than water. Hit subscribe because this story will break your heart and then put it back together in the most unexpected way. My name is Elena Rossi, though back then I was Elena Martinez. I'm 63 years old, and until 18 months ago, I thought my life was exactly what it was supposed to be: comfortable, predictable, and quietly miserable. I worked as a senior loan officer at First National Bank, a job I'd held for 27 years. I had a husband, David, who I'd been married to for 31 years. I had two grown children, my daughter Sophia, 28, and my son Miguel, 26, both successful in their own careers. From the outside, my life looked perfect. Nice house in the suburbs, steady income, respectable family. But inside that house, I was slowly dying of loneliness. The truth about my perfect marriage: David hadn't touched me in over 5 years. Not a hug, not a kiss, not even a hand on my shoulder. When I tried to initiate any contact, he would stiffen and find an excuse to move away. We ate dinner in silence most nights. David would scroll through his phone while eating, giving me one-word answers to my attempts at conversation. How was work? Fine. Would you like me to make that pasta dish you used to like? Whatever. I felt like I was living with a stranger who tolerated my presence, but didn't particularly enjoy it. My children had their own lives, and I wasn't part of them. Sophia would call maybe once a month, usually when she needed something. Could I babysit last minute? Could I lend her money? But when I called her just to chat, she was always too busy. "Mom, I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of something." Miguel was even worse. When I called him on his birthday last year, I could hear typing in the background. "Thanks, Mum. Hey, I'm actually in the middle of something. Can I call you later?" He never called back. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered about my own invisibility. My birthdays passed without celebration. David would mumble "Happy birthday" over coffee. Sophia might send a text. Miguel might remember days later. Last year, I spent my 62nd birthday alone, eating frozen dinner while David watched TV in the next room. I cried in the bathroom that night, quietly so he wouldn't hear. Then I started working nights, and everything changed. The bank had cut my hours due to budget constraints, and I needed extra income to maintain our lifestyle, though David never thanked me for working 2 jobs to help support us. I started cleaning offices at night for a commercial cleaning company. It was honest work, and I didn't mind it. There was something peaceful about working in empty buildings, listening to music in my earbuds, making things clean and organized. One of my regular contracts was a 24-hour diner downtown called Mike's Place. I would clean there from midnight to 3 a.m. 3 nights a week. It wasn't a fancy place, just a typical greasy spoon that served coffee and burgers to night shift workers, taxi drivers, and insomniacs. The first time I saw him, I almost didn't notice. It was about 1:30 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October. I was emptying the trash cans in the alley behind the diner when I heard a sound, a rustling like an animal digging through garbage. I looked toward the dumpster and saw a small figure crouched next to it, pulling things out of a torn garbage bag. At first, I thought it was a teenager, but as I got closer, I realized it was a child, a little boy, maybe 10 years old, wearing clothes that were too big for him and shoes with holes in the toes. He was eating something, a half-eaten hamburger he'd found in the trash. My heart broke instantly. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to scare him. "Hey, sweetie, what are you doing out here?" He looked up at me with the biggest, darkest eyes I'd ever seen, eyes that held too much knowledge for a 10-year-old, eyes that had seen things no child should see. He didn't run, which surprised me. He just looked at me, still clutching that garbage hamburger in his small hands. "I'm hungry," he said simply, in accented English. "What's your name?" I asked, crouching down to his level. "Marco," he whispered. "Where are your parents, Marco?" He shrugged, a gesture that tried to be nonchalant but couldn't hide the pain behind it. "Don't have any." "Where do you live?" Another shrug. "Wherever." I looked at this beautiful, vulnerable child eating garbage in an alley at 1:30 in the morning, and something inside my chest cracked open. "Marco," I said gently, "would you like me to get you some fresh food? Something warm?" His eyes widened with hope, but then narrowed with suspicion. "Why?" "Because you're hungry, and no child should have to eat from the trash." I went back into the diner and bought him a hot meal, a cheeseburger, fries, chocolate milk, and a piece of pie. The night manager, Pete, knew me from my regular cleaning shifts and didn't ask questions. I brought the food out to the alley, where Marco was still sitting by the dumpster, as if he was afraid to hope that I would really come back. When he saw the bag of food, his whole face lit up. Not just smiled, lit up, like someone had turned on a light inside him. "For me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "For you." He ate like he hadn't had a proper meal in weeks, which he probably hadn't. While he ate, I sat on an overturned crate and asked him gentle questions. Marco was 10 years old. His mother had died 6 months ago. He wouldn't tell me how, but from the way his face closed off, I suspected it wasn't from natural causes. He had no father that he knew of, no relatives that he could find. He'd been living on the streets since his mother died, sleeping in doorways, under bridges, anywhere he could find shelter. He survived by digging through restaurant trash, begging for spare change, and doing odd jobs for people who would hire a kid off the books. "Don't you go to school?" I asked. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Where?" "I don't have an address. Don't have papers. Don't have anything." "What about social services? Child protection?" The fear that flashed across his face was instant and visceral. "No. They put you in bad places sometimes. I heard stories. I'm better on my own." When he finished eating, he looked at me with those enormous dark eyes and said something that stopped my heart. "Thank you, lady. You're nice. Most people pretend they don't see me." I knew exactly how he felt. The next night I brought him dinner again, and the night after that, and the night after that. It became our routine. I would finish cleaning the diner, buy Marco a hot meal, and sit with him in that alley while he ate. We would talk about nothing, about everything. Marco was incredibly smart. He could do math in his head that impressed me. He had taught himself to read by looking at discarded newspapers and magazines. He knew the bus routes all over the city because he sometimes rode them to stay warm. But more than his intelligence, what struck me was his kindness. Despite everything he'd been through, he was gentle and thoughtful. He would ask me about my day, remember details from our previous conversations, Thanked me multiple times for every meal. "How was work today, Miss Eleanor?" he would ask. He called me Miss Eleanor from the very beginning, like I was someone important. "Did you remember to take your medicine for your back?" I had mentioned once that my back hurt from all the cleaning. "You look tired tonight. Are you getting enough sleep?" When was the last time someone in my family had asked me how I was? When was the last time anyone had noticed if I looked tired or worried about my health? This little boy, who had nothing, was showing me more care and consideration than my husband and children combined. After 3 weeks, I realized something that terrified me. I was falling in love. Not romantic love, maternal love. The kind of fierce, protective love that makes you want to move mountains for someone. Marco had become the brightest part of my day. This little boy, who had nothing, was showing me more care than my husband and children combined. "How was work today, Miss Elena?" he would ask. "You look tired tonight. Are you getting enough sleep?" When was the last time someone in my family had asked me how I was? And then my world collapsed again. The weather was getting colder, and I could see Marco shivering in his too big clothes. I started bringing blankets, a jacket, anything to keep him warm, but I knew it wasn't enough. This child was living on the streets in weather that was getting worse every day. That's when I started thinking the unthinkable. What if I took him home? The night that changed everything. It was late November when Marco was burning with fever, shivering so hard he could barely hold his cup of hot chocolate. "Miss Eleanor," he said through chattering teeth, "I think I'm getting sick." "That's it," I said. "You're coming home with me." Marco stared at me with those enormous dark eyes. "You mean stay with you? Like inside?" "Yes, with a real bed and real food whenever you want it." For a moment, he looked like he was going to cry. "But what about your family?" "My family will understand that sometimes you have to do the right thing." I was lying, of course. I knew exactly how they would react. But nothing prepared me for David's reaction when we got home. Marco sat in the passenger seat of my Honda Civic, staring out the window at the neighborhoods we drove through. He'd probably never been in this part of the city, the safe, suburban part where people like me lived comfortable, middle-class lives. "These houses are so big," he whispered. "This is where I live," I told him. "Where we live now." When we pulled into my driveway, Marco looked at my modest two-story house like it was a mansion. "All this is yours?" "Ours," I corrected. David's car was in the garage, which meant he was home and probably asleep. It was almost 4 a.m. I led Marco through the front door, turning on lights as we went. He stood in my living room, still wearing his too big jacket and dirty shoes, looking around like he'd entered a fairy tale. "Are you hungry?" I asked. He nodded shyly. I made him scrambled eggs, toast, and bacon while he sat at my kitchen table, touching everything carefully like he was afraid it might disappear. "Miss Elena," he said quietly, "is this real?" "It's real, sweetheart. This is your home now." While he ate, I went upstairs to prepare the guest bedroom. I put fresh sheets on the bed, found some of Miguel's old clothes that might fit Marco, and set out clean towels. When I came back downstairs, Marco had finished eating and was standing by the kitchen window, looking out at our backyard. "There's so much space," he said in wonder. "Would you like to see your room?" His eyes went wide. "My room?" I led him upstairs and showed him the guest bedroom. Nothing fancy, just a twin bed, a dresser, a small desk, and a window that looked out over the street. Marco stood in the doorway, not moving. "This is mine," he whispered. "This is yours." He walked slowly to the bed and sat on the edge, bouncing slightly to test the mattress. Then he lay down and pulled the clean blankets up to his chin. "Miss Elena," he said, his voice muffled by the pillow. "I never had my own bed before." I had to leave the room before I started crying. When I went downstairs, David was in the kitchen. He was standing by the coffee maker in his bathrobe, looking confused and irritated. "Eleanor, what's going on? I heard voices. And why does it smell like breakfast? It's 4 in the morning." This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and anticipating. "David, we need to talk." "Talk about what? And who was up here?" I heard footsteps upstairs. I took a deep breath. "I brought someone home. A child. He's staying with us." David stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You what?" "His name is Marco. He's 10 years old. He's been living on the streets, and he's sick, and I couldn't leave him out there." "Elena, what the hell are you talking about? You can't just bring random kids home. Where are his parents?" "He doesn't have parents. His mother died. He has no one." "Then call social services. Call the police. You can't just kidnap some kid off the street." "I didn't kidnap him. He came willingly. And I'm not calling social services because he needs a real home, not some overloaded foster system." David was getting that look on his face. The look he got when he thought I was being completely unreasonable about something. "Eleanor, listen to yourself. You don't know anything about this kid. He could be dangerous. He could be lying. He could have diseases. You can't just bring strangers into our house." "He's not a stranger. I've been taking care of him for 6 weeks." "Taking care of him how?" "I've been feeding him, talking to him, getting to know him. David, he's a good kid who's had terrible luck. He needs help." "Then let someone else help him. This is not our problem." "He is not a problem. He's a child." David ran his hands through his hair, clearly frustrated. "Elena, this is insane. We're 63 and 65 years old. We're not equipped to take care of a 10-year-old kid, especially some street kid who probably has all kinds of issues." "I'm perfectly equipped to take care of him." "No, you're not. You work 2 jobs. You're barely home as it is. And I'm certainly not going to become some instant father to a random kid you found in an alley." "I'm not asking you to be his father. I'm asking you to let me help a child who needs help." "By bringing him to live in our house." "Eleanor, think about this practically. We don't have guardianship. We don't have any legal right to keep him. What happens when the authorities find out? What happens if his real family shows up?" "He doesn't have real family, and I'll figure out the legal stuff." "You'll figure out the legal stuff?" "Elena, you can't just adopt random children because you feel sorry for them." The word adopt hung in the air between us. I hadn't even said that word to myself yet, but hearing David say it, I realized that's exactly what I wanted to do. "Maybe I can't," I said quietly, "but I can try." David looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Eleanor, what is this really about?" "It's about doing the right thing." "Bullshit. This is about you trying to replace the kids who don't call you enough." The accuracy of that accusation hit me like a slap. "That's not—" "It is, and you know it. Sophia and Miguel have their own lives, and instead of accepting that, you're trying to fill some void by rescuing street kids." "This has nothing to do with Sophia and Miguel." "Doesn't it? When was the last time you talked to our actual children for more than 5 minutes? When was the last time you saw our granddaughters? But you've been sneaking around for weeks with some homeless kid, playing house, pretending to be his mother." I wasn't pretending anything. I was helping him by lying to me, by keeping secrets, by making decisions that affect both of us without consulting me. He was right, and I hated him for being right. I had been lying. I had been keeping secrets. But I'd done it, Atar, because I knew exactly how he would react. Exactly like this. David, if you could see him, if you could talk to him. He's smart and sweet and grateful for everything. He's been through horrible things, and all he needs is someone to care about him. I'm sure he's very nice. But Eleanor, we are not the people to save him. We're too old, we're not prepared. And frankly, I don't want to become responsible for some traumatized kid at this stage of my life. What if it was Emma or Lucy? What if our granddaughters were alone and scared and living on the streets? Wouldn't you want someone to help them? That's different. How is it different? Because they're our family. And Marco could be our family too. David shook his head. No, Eleanor. He can't. He's not our responsibility. And I'm not doing this. We argued for another hour. By the time we were done, the sun was coming up and David had made his position crystal clear. Marco could stay for maybe one night until I could figure out the proper channels to get him help, but he was not moving into our house permanently. Eleanor, I mean it. Call social services today. Find him a proper placement. I want him gone by this weekend. And if I refuse? David looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of cold finality. Then you need to decide what's more important to you, your marriage or some random kid you've known for 6 weeks. He went back upstairs to shower and get ready for work, leaving me standing in the kitchen, shaking with anger and heartbreak. How had I lived with this man for 31 years? How had I never noticed how cold he was, how incapable of compassion? I checked on Marco, who was sleeping peacefully in the guest bed, his face relaxed for the first time since I'd met him. Looking at him, I realized that David was wrong about one thing. This wasn't about replacing Sophia and Miguel. This was about finally finding someone who needed my love and was willing to accept it. When Sophia arrived an hour later, I knew David had called her. I was making breakfast for Marco when my daughter walked into the kitchen without knocking, clearly agitated. Mum, what is going on? Dad called me and said you brought some homeless kid home and you're talking about adopting him. Your father exaggerated. Did you or did you not bring a strange child to live in your house? I sighed. His name is Marco, and yes, he's staying here. Mum, are you having some kind of breakdown? This is not normal behavior. Helping a child in need is not normal behavior. Bringing random children home is not normal behavior. Mum, you don't know anything about this kid. Where did you even find him? I explained the situation. How I'd been feeding Marco for weeks. How he'd been living on the streets. How he was sick and cold and had nowhere to go. Sophia listened with increasing alarm. Mom, this is crazy. You can't just decide to become a mother again at 63. What about your job? What about your marriage? What about your actual family? What about my actual family? When was the last time you called me just to talk, Sophia? When was the last time you invited me to spend time with Emma and Lucy? When was the last time any of you acted like you needed me for anything other than emergency babysitting or money? Sophia looked taken aback. That's not fair. Isn't it? I have been lonely in this house for years, Sophia. Your father barely acknowledges I exist. You and Miguel treat me like an obligation. I found a child who actually wants my company, who appreciates my care, who lights up when he sees me. Why is that so threatening to all of you? Because it's not your child. Mum, you're talking about upending your entire life for some kid you met 6 weeks ago. That's not normal. That's not healthy. What's not healthy is living in a house where no one cares if I exist. Sophia stared at me. Is that really what you think? That we don't care about you? When was the last time you asked me how I was? Really asked, and waited for an answer. Sophia opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. When was the last time any of you remembered my birthday without me having to remind you? When was the last time you included me in your plans because you wanted my company, not because you needed something from me? Mum, we all have busy lives. And this child has no life at all. He's been grateful for every meal, every conversation, every moment of attention I've given him. He asks about my day. He worries about my health. He says thank you for things you all take for granted. So you're replacing us with him? I'm not replacing anyone. I'm adding someone to my life who actually wants to be there. That's when Marco appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing Miguel's old pajamas that were still too big for him. He looked scared and uncertain, clearly having heard raised voices. Miss Elena? He said quietly. Is everything okay? Sophia turned to look at him, and I saw her expression soften slightly. Marco was a beautiful child. Those enormous dark eyes, that sweet face, the way he carried himself like he was trying not to take up too much space in the world. Everything's fine, sweetheart, I told him. Marco, this is my daughter Sophia. Sophia, this is Marco. Marco walked over to me and stood close, not quite hiding behind me, but clearly seeking comfort. Nice to meet you, Miss Sophia, he said politely. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, then back at me. Mum, can we talk privately? I looked down at Marco. Are you hungry, sweetheart? Would you like some breakfast? He nodded, and I made him scrambled eggs and toast while Sophia waited in the living room. When I joined her, she was sitting on the couch, looking troubled. Mum, I can see why you care about him. He seems sweet, but this is bigger than just wanting to help a kid. You're talking about changing your whole life. Maybe my whole life needs changing. What about Dad? What about him? Your father has made it clear that he doesn't want Marco here, and he doesn't particularly want me here either. We've been like roommates for years, Sophia. Polite strangers sharing a house. That's not true. When was the last time your father told me he loved me? When was the last time he asked about my day, or remembered something important to me, or showed any interest in my thoughts or feelings? Sophia was quiet. I've been invisible in this family for years, I continued. But with Marco, I matter. I have purpose. I'm not just the woman who cooks and cleans and provides emergency childcare. I'm someone he looks forward to seeing, someone he trusts, someone he needs. Mum, you matter to us too. Do I? Really, if I disappeared tomorrow, how long would it take you to notice? Sophia looked stung. That's not fair. You called me twice last month, Sophia. Both times you needed something. The time before that was 3 weeks earlier, also because you needed something. Our entire relationship has become you calling me when you need a favor. I've been busy with the girls and work, and I understand that. I really do. You have your own life, your own family, your own priorities. That's normal and healthy. But it means I need to find my own purpose, my own meaning. And I've found it with Marco. That afternoon, Miguel arrived. Sophia had clearly called him because he walked into the house looking grim and determined. Mum, we need to talk. Hello to you too, Miguel. Dad and Sophia told me what's going on. This has to stop. What has to stop? Me helping a child? You bringing random kids home and talking about adopting them. Mom, this is insane. I was getting tired of everyone calling me insane for caring about Marco. His name is Marco, and he's not random. I've been getting to know him for weeks. Mom, listen to yourself. You work at a bank. You're a respectable member of the community. You can't just start collecting homeless children. I'm not collecting anyone. I'm helping one specific child who needs help. By bringing him to live in your house, without any legal authority, without knowing his background, without considering the consequences of helping someone, the consequences of making impulsive decisions that could ruin your life. Mum, what happens when the authorities find out you have this kid? What happens if he's not who you think he is? What happens if his family shows up? What happens to your marriage, your job, your reputation? My reputation? Miguel, when did you start caring about my reputation? I've always cared about you, Mum. You've called me 3 times in the past 6 months. 3 times. And one of those was to ask me to send you money. Miguel looked uncomfortable. I've been busy. Everyone's been busy. Everyone has more important things to do than spend time with me. But this child doesn't. This child is grateful for my company. He appreciates my care. He makes me feel needed and valued in a way that none of you have in years. So you're punishing us by adopting a street kid? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm trying to save someone. Mum, you can't save everyone. I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm trying to save one little boy who deserves better than living in alleys and eating from garbage cans. Miguel ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that reminded me painfully of David. Mum, let's say you're right. Let's say this kid is everything you think he is, sweet and grateful and deserving. You still can't just take him. There are legal processes. There are proper channels. You could get in serious trouble. Then I'll figure out the legal stuff. You keep saying that, but do you have any idea what's involved in adopting a child? Especially at your age? Especially a child with no documentation, no legal guardian, no official record of who he is or where he came from? I hadn't thought about the documentation issue. Marco had told me he had no papers, no birth certificate, no school records. How do you legally adopt a child who doesn't officially exist? There has to be a way, I said. Maybe there is, but it could take years. And in the meantime, you're harboring an undocumented minor. Mum, you could lose your job. You could face criminal charges. 3 days later, everything fell apart. I was at the bank, trying to focus on loan applications while mentally planning how to enroll Marco in school, when I started feeling dizzy and nauseous. At first, I thought it was stress from all the family pressure. David had been giving me the silent treatment since our argument. Sophia called twice a day to check on my mental state. Miguel had threatened to call social services himself if I didn't come to my senses. But as the morning wore on, the dizziness got worse. I was having trouble concentrating, trouble walking in a straight line. My supervisor, Janet, noticed me swaying at my desk. Eleanor, are you all right? You look pale. I think I might be coming down with something, I said, which was when the room started spinning and I collapsed. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital with a doctor telling me I'd had a severe reaction to some medication I'd been taking for my arthritis. Something about my blood pressure dropping dangerously low. We're going to keep you for observation for a few days, the doctor said. Make sure your levels stabilize. My first thought wasn't about my health. It was about Marco. I'd left him at home that morning with instructions to stay inside, to heat up the soup I'd left in the refrigerator for lunch, to call me at work if he needed anything. I'd planned to be home by 3 p.m. Now it was Thursday evening, and I was stuck in a hospital bed with no idea when I'd be released. I asked the nurse if I could use the phone to call home. It rang and rang, but no one answered, which made sense. Marco wouldn't answer the phone unless he knew who was calling, and David was probably at work. I called David's work number. Eleanor, are you okay? Sophia said you were in the hospital. I'm fine. David, is Marco okay? I left him at home this morning and the kid is fine. Sophia took care of it. What do you mean she took care of it? There was a pause that made my blood run cold. David, what does that mean? Elena, we talked about this. You were in no condition to be responsible for him and… David, where is Marco? Another pause. Where is he? He's somewhere safe. Where is he? Eleanor, calm down. Your blood pressure. David, if you don't tell me where Marco is right now, I swear to God. He's been placed with social services, temporarily, until you're better and can make rational decisions about… The phone slipped from my hands. They had taken him. While I was unconscious in a hospital bed, my own family had taken Marco and given him away. I discharged myself against medical advice the next morning. The doctor wanted to keep me another day, but I signed whatever papers I had to sign and took a taxi home. The house felt dead when I walked in. I went straight to Marco's room, the guest room that had been his room for exactly 1 week. All his things were gone. The clothes I'd bought him, the books, the little teddy bear I'd picked up at the drugstore because he'd mentioned once that he'd never had a stuffed animal. The bed was stripped, the room spotless, like he'd never been there at all. I found David in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper like it was any other Saturday morning. Where is he? David didn't look up from his paper. Eleanor, sit down. We need to talk. Where is he? He's in protective custody. It's temporary. You gave him away. You gave away my child. He's not your child. He was never your child. Eleanor, you've been sick. You've been making irrational decisions, and we had to step in. Who is we? Sophia, Miguel, and I. We talked to social services, explained the situation, and they agreed that the boy needed proper placement. I stared at my husband of 31 years, this man I'd shared a home with, a life with, and I realized I was looking at a stranger. I trusted you, I whispered. I left him in your care, and you betrayed both of us. Eleanor, we did what was best for everyone. The kid will be placed with a proper family, a young family who can give him what he needs. He needed me. I was giving him what he needed. You were giving him what you needed. There's a difference. Get out. What? Get out of this house. Get out of my sight. I never want to see you again. David finally looked up from his newspaper. Eleanor, you're being dramatic. When you calm down… I will never calm down. You took the most important thing in my life, and you threw it away like garbage. You are dead to me. Elena, get out. David left, muttering something about me needing psychiatric help. But I wasn't listening. I was already planning. I was going to find Marco, and I was going to get him back. Finding him took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of calling every social services office in the city, every group home, every foster care agency. 3 weeks of being told I had no legal standing, no right to information, no claim on a child who wasn't related to me. 3 weeks of David, Sophia, and Miguel taking turns calling me, trying to convince me to let it go and move on with my life. 3 weeks of crying myself to sleep every night, wondering if Marco thought I had abandoned him like everyone else in his life. I finally found him at a group home on the other side of the city. A tired-looking social worker named Mrs. Patterson agreed to meet with me after I explained that I was the woman who'd been caring for Marco before his placement. "He's been asking about you," she said quietly. "Every day. He wants to know when Miss Elena is coming to get him." "Can I see him?" "You're not family. You have no legal relationship to him." "Please. Just for 5 minutes. He must be so scared and confused." Mrs. Patterson looked at me for a long moment, then checked her watch. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes. If someone happened to visit the common room while I was gone, I wouldn't necessarily know about it." She gave me directions to the common room and left me alone in the hallway. I found Marco sitting by himself in a corner, reading a book that was too young for him. He looked smaller than I remembered, and sadder. When he looked up and saw me, his face exploded with joy. "Miss Eleanor!" He ran to me and threw his arms around my waist, holding on like he was afraid I might disappear. "I knew you would come," he sobbed into my shirt. "I knew you didn't forget about me." I knelt down to his level and held his face in my hands. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he'd lost weight. "Marco, sweetheart, I am so sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I was sick, I was in the hospital, and my family, they made a mistake. Are you here to take me home?" The hope in his voice broke my heart. "I'm trying to, sweetheart, but it might take some time. There are complicated grown-up things I have to figure out. But I can come home eventually. I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen." Marco nodded seriously. "I'll wait for you, Miss Elena. I'll be good, and I'll wait." "You don't have to be good, Marco. You just have to be you. And I promise you, I will never stop trying to bring you home." A staff member appeared in the doorway, clearly looking for unauthorized visitors. My time was up. "I have to go now, but I'll be back as soon as I can. Okay?" "Okay. I love you, Miss Elena." It was the first time he'd ever said those words to me. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." That night, I made the biggest decision of my life. I sat in my empty house, surrounded by 30 years of marriage, thinking about everything I was about to give up. My job at the bank, a career I'd built over nearly 3 decades. My house, the home David and I had bought when Sophia was a baby. My relationships with my biological children, already strained beyond repair. My entire life as I knew it. But when I thought about Marco's face when he saw me, when I remembered him saying, "I knew you didn't forget about me," the decision became clear. Some things are worth losing everything for. I called my sister Rosa, who lived in Rome with her Italian husband. Rosa and I had always been close, even across the ocean. "Rosa, I need your help with something crazy." I explained the entire situation, Marco, my family's betrayal, my plan to somehow get him back and start over somewhere new. "Eleanor, are you sure about this? You're talking about leaving your whole life behind." "My whole life left me behind years ago. Rosa, I've been dying slowly in this house for decades. This little boy is the first thing that's made me feel alive in years." "And you think you can get him out of the system legally?" "I don't know. Maybe not. But I can't leave him there, wondering why I abandoned him like everyone else." There was a long pause. "How can I help?" It took 2 more weeks to plan everything. Rosa sent me paperwork showing that I had a place to stay in Italy, a support system, a reason to believe I could provide a stable home for Marco. I liquidated every asset I had, my retirement account, my savings, even some jewelry that had been my mother's. I bought 2 plane tickets to Rome. The hardest part was getting Marco out of the group home without technically kidnapping him. I went back to visit Mrs. Patterson. I want to apply for emergency custody, I told her. Mrs. Martinez, we've been through this. You have no legal standing. What if I did? What if I had documentation showing that Marco's mother had named me as his guardian before she died? This was a lie, of course, but Mrs. Patterson didn't know that. Do you have such documentation? I'm working on getting copies from the courthouse. But in the meantime, Marco is deteriorating in that group home. He's lost weight. He's not sleeping. He's having nightmares. Wouldn't a temporary placement with someone he trusts be better for his emotional health while we sort out the legal issues? Mrs. Patterson looked tired. She probably had 50 other cases just as complicated as Marco's. If you can provide documentation of guardianship, we can discuss a temporary placement. And in the meantime, that boy needs stability and care, which he's not getting in our overloaded system. She didn't exactly say I could take him, but she didn't say I couldn't. The day I got Marco back was the happiest day of my life. I picked him up from the group home on a Tuesday morning, telling the staff that we were going to lunch and a movie while his placement options were being reviewed. Marco was ecstatic. He chatted non-stop during the car ride, telling me about the other kids, the staff, how much he'd missed our talks, how he'd been saving stories to tell me. Miss Elena, are we going back to your house? We're going somewhere even better, sweetheart. Somewhere we can be a real family. Where? Italy. Have you ever heard of Italy? Marco's eyes went wide. Like the country? With the pizza and the Colosseum? Exactly like that. My sister lives there, and she's excited to meet you. We're going to live there together, you and me. Forever? For as long as you want to. Marco was quiet for a moment, processing this. Will your family be angry that we left? My family made their choice, Marco. Now I'm making mine. And I choose you. At the airport, Marco held my hand so tightly I thought he might break my fingers. He'd never been on a plane before, never been out of the state, never imagined traveling to another country. Miss Elena, what if they don't let us on the plane? They'll let us on. We have tickets and passports. I'd managed to get Marco an emergency passport by claiming he was my adopted son. Another lie, but a necessary one. What if your sister doesn't like me? She's going to love you. I told her all about you, and she can't wait to meet you. What if I don't like Italy? Then we'll figure something else out. But Marco, I think you're going to love it there. There are so many things to see and do, and you'll go to school and learn Italian, and we'll explore everything together. As our plane taxied down the runway, Marco pressed his face to the window, watching the ground fall away below us. Miss Elena, are you scared? A little bit, I admitted. Me too, but we're scared together, so it's okay. That's exactly right, sweetheart. Landing in Rome was like entering a fairy tale. Rosa was waiting for us at the airport, holding a sign with our names and a huge smile. She hugged me first, then knelt down to Marco's level. You must be Marco, she said in careful English. I'm Rosa, Eleanor's sister. Welcome to Italy. Marco looked up at me uncertainly. It's okay, I told him. Rosa is family now. Our family. Rosa had prepared her spare room for Marco, not fancy, but clean and warm, with a window that looked out over a courtyard where kids played soccer in the evenings. This is for me? Marco asked, just like he had that first night in my house. This is for you, Rosa confirmed, for as long as you want it. That night, after Marco had gone to bed, Rosa and I sat on her balcony drinking wine and talking about everything I'd left behind. "Do you regret it?" she asked. I thought about David, about Sophia and Miguel, about the job I'd walked away from, the house I'd abandoned, the life I'd built over 63 years. Then I thought about Marco's face when he saw that airplane, when he realized we were really going on an adventure together. I thought about how he'd asked 3 times if I was sure I wanted him to come with me, like he couldn't quite believe someone would choose him. "No," I said. "I don't regret it at all." 6 months later, our new life was more beautiful than I'd ever imagined. Marco was enrolled in a local school, learning Italian faster than I was. He came home every day up to bursting with stories about his teacher, his classmates, the things he was learning. "Miss Eleanor, did you know that Rome is almost 3,000 years old? That's older than anything in America." "Miss Elena, my teacher says I'm really good at math. She wants to put me in the advanced class." "Miss Eleanor, there's a boy named Giuseppe in my class who wants to come over and play soccer. Can he? Can I have friends over?" Watching Marco make friends, excel in school, and discover his own potential was better than any happiness I'd ever found in my old life. I got a job working part-time at a local bank, using my experience to help Rosa's neighbors with financial planning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. More importantly, Marco and I had developed the kind of relationship I'd always dreamed of having with my biological children. He would tell me about his day over dinner every night. He would ask for help with homework, not because he had to, but because he genuinely wanted to learn. He would curl up next to me on the couch while we watched Italian movies, practicing the language together. "Miss Elena, are you happy here?" "I'm happier than I've ever been in my life, sweetheart. Are you happy?" I think this is what happy feels like. I wasn't sure before. The call from Sophia came 8 months after we'd arrived in Italy. I almost didn't answer when I saw the international number, but something made me pick up. "Mum? Mum, is that you?" "Hello, Sophia." "Mum, where are you? We've been looking everywhere. Dad said you just disappeared, that you left a note saying you were starting over somewhere, but I'm in Italy." "Italy? Mom, what are you doing in Italy?" "I'm living here, with Marco." There was a long silence. "Mum, you can't just disappear to another country with someone else's kid. That's kidnapping." "Marco isn't someone else's kid. He's my son now." "Mum, that's not how adoption works. You can't just take a child and move to Europe." "I can if that child has no one else in the world and needs someone to love him." "Mum, you need to come home. We can work this out. We can help you through whatever crisis you're having, but you can't just—" "Sophia, I am home. For the first time in decades, I'm actually home." "What about Dad? What about us? What about your granddaughters?" I thought about Emma and Lucy, the granddaughters I rarely saw, who barely knew me, whose own mother was too busy to maintain a real relationship with me. What about them? When was the last time you brought them to visit me? When was the last time they asked about me? "Mum, that's not fair." "You're right. It's not fair. It's not fair that I spent 30 years being ignored and taken for granted by people who were supposed to love me. But I'm done accepting unfair, Sophia." "So you're just going to abandon your real family for some random kid?" "My real family abandoned me first. This random kid, as you call him, is the only person in years who's told me he loves me and meant it." 2 years have passed since that conversation. Marco is 12 now, fluent in Italian, thriving in school, and completely integrated into our little community. He plays soccer with the neighborhood kids, helps Rosa in her garden, and still asks me about my day every single evening. Last month, he came home from school with a permission slip for a field trip. Miss Elena, I need a parent to sign this. I looked at the form, which had a line for parent guardian signature. Marco, what should I write here? I mean, officially, I'm not. He looked at me seriously. You're my mum. That's what you write. So I wrote Elena Rossi, mother, and realized it was the truest thing I'd ever written. I legally changed my last name to Rossi, my maiden name, and began the process of adopting Marco through the Italian system. It's complicated, but not impossible, especially since he has no other family, and I can demonstrate that I've been caring for him successfully. David has tried to contact me a few times through Rosa, but I have nothing to say to him. He made his choice when he gave away the child I loved. Sophia calls occasionally, usually to tell me that I'm being selfish or irresponsible, that I've embarrassed the family, that I need to come to my senses. Miguel doesn't call at all. But you know what? I don't miss them. I thought I would, but I don't. How can you miss people who never really saw you in the first place? Last week, something happened that made me realize just how right my decision was. Marco came home from school looking thoughtful. Miss Elena, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. My teacher was asking about my family for a project, and I started to tell her about my mother who died, and my life before. But then I realized that doesn't feel like my real story anymore. What feels like your real story? My real story is that I was lost and scared and alone, and then you found me. And you chose me even when everyone said you shouldn't. And you brought me to this amazing place where I get to go to school and have friends and eat dinner every night and know that someone loves me. He paused, looking out the window at the courtyard where kids were playing. My teacher asked if I missed my old life, and I told her no, because my old life was just surviving. This is actually living. I had to leave the room to cry. Here's what I want every woman watching this to understand. For 30 years, I tried to be the perfect wife and mother to people who took my love for granted. I thought that was what love looked like, giving and giving to people who never gave back. But real love is mutual. Real love makes you feel valued and necessary to someone's happiness. Marco didn't just need me to save him. He saved me too. From a life of quiet desperation, from years of being invisible in my own family. Yes, I gave up everything I'd built over 6 decades, but what I gained was worth everything I lost. A son who lights up when he sees me, a purpose that fills me with joy, a life I actually want to live. Would you leave everything behind for someone who finally made you feel seen? People ask if I regret my decision. Here's my answer. Every morning I wake up next to the most important person in my world. I make breakfast for someone who thanks me and asks about my day. In the evening, Marco tells me about school, not because I ask, but because he wants to share his life with me. Before bed, he hugs me and tells me he loves me, and I know he means it. I spent 30 years in a house full of people who barely acknowledged my existence. Now I live with someone who sees me, appreciates me, and chose me back. Tell me in the comments. I'm reading them all. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? How did you handle it? Have you ever made a choice everyone said was crazy, but felt absolutely right? What would you sacrifice for someone who truly needed you? Drop your answers below. Share your stories of choosing love over obligation, of finding family in unexpected places. Subscribe if you believe that love should be mutual, that family is about choice as much as blood. that it's never too late to start over. Remember, you are never too old to start over. You are never too invisible to matter to someone. And you are never wrong for choosing people who choose you back. Marco still calls me Miss Eleanor sometimes, even though I'm legally his mother now. And every time he does, I remember that day in the alley when a scared, hungry little boy gave me the gift of feeling needed again. They called it kidnapping. I call it rescue. And I rescued both of us.